Pop Culture and Representations of Soldiers Suffering from PTSD by Austin Merriman. PTSD Representations Through Film. Taxi Driver, Apocalypse Now, The Deer Hunter, Born on the 4th of July. These are a few examples of movies that depict soldiers' struggles as they return home from combat. The images that pop culture portrays through film have a great impact on the opinions that are formed about veterans with PTSD. Vietnam War movies portray dysfunctional, deranged, and even dangerous vets. None depict a healthy, functional veteran. Pop culture's emotional representation. Every summer when it rains, I hear the jungle, I hear the plains. I can't tell no one, I feel ashamed, afraid someday I'll go insane. Charlie Daniels. Songs about PTSD often depict the emotional struggles that veterans face and portray veterans as people who are one step away from completely losing their minds. Their battle is usually kept private, trapped inside their own minds because of the embarrassment and humiliation that the stigmas that pop culture has attached have caused. Stigmas and stereotypes. Nutcase, psycho, unbalanced. These are some of the words that veteran Jeremiah Workman has been tagged with since being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. He is not only living with the disorder, but also with the stigma that popular culture has attached to it, PTSD. Fighting the image is as hard as battling the disorder for him. Popular culture's influence on PTSD. Jeremiah Workman believes that the image that people have of veterans has been framed by popular culture. The symptoms described in songs and portrayed in movies are images that are all too familiar to this generation of soldiers. According to Workman, Vietnam vets have been portrayed as loose cannons, violent and sociopathic. If they're not violent sociopathic victims, they're criminals. Some people believe that an ingrained image of how a soldier is supposed to react to adjusting to coming home from war causes more veterans to show symptoms. The argument is made that culture and trauma working together is to blame for the major increase in diagnoses of the disorder and not simply the trauma on its own. Learned experience. Similarities between Gulf War and Vietnam veterans. Limbeck attributes the influential representations of post-Vietnam vets by popular culture for the similarities and symptoms between the Gulf War veterans and Vietnam veterans. This generation of veterans grew up immersed in this popular culture of what it looks like to be a war veteran coming home. He believes their reactions are from learned experiences. The movies that depicted veterans of the Vietnam War showed that the same symptoms of PTSD long before the term PTSD existed, but some still believe that the disorder is culture-based. Timeless condition. Railway spine, shell shock, post-Vietnam syndrome. Others argue that PTSD has existed as long as wars have been fought and therefore popular culture is not to blame for the disorder. Edgar Jones believes that post-traumatic stress disorder is a timeless condition which existed before it was codified in modern diagnostic classifications but was described by different names. There is a documented story about a soldier that was admitted to a hospital in 1918 suffering from vertigo, night starts, claustrophobia, tremors, headaches, poor sleep, and weakness and hallucinations. That case clearly shows that PTSD existed long before its diagnosis. Combat trauma and PTSD. Extended exposure to combat to blame. Some people argue extended exposure to the trauma of combat is the cause of the increasing cases of PTSD. Peter Turk explains that although estimates of risk for PTSD may seem inflated, it is reasonable to expect that multiple deployments, the experiencing of numerous traumas, and long periods of sustained threat associated with Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom deployment will increase the risk of developing PTSD. There is no mention of culture being a cause of PTSD in Turk's study. Rather, extended exposure to combat and/or trauma is to blame. Popular culture's impact on PTSD. Popular culture's representations of PTSD ruins veterans' lives. The way veterans are depicted has a great relationship to the way they are treated by civilians. The stigma that popular culture has attached to PTSD is to blame for the fact that many veterans with PTSD are not getting the help that they need to heal. Veterans will begin to step forward to receive the help that they desperately need if the stereotypes are modified. Popular culture's positive impact. Some PTSD sufferers are finding that writing down their feelings are helpful in the healing process. Jeremiah Workman wrote Shadow of the Sword in hopes that he could bring some truth to the disorder, as well as helping himself deal with the disorder. Through literature, some veterans are finding it therapeutic to release the traumatic experiences that are trapped in their minds. Workman is an example of more and more veterans who are displaying the bravery it takes to share their personal stories with the intention of breaking the myths that are associated with what he refers to as a demon. Shattering the stigma. The stereotype and the stigma associated with PTSD must be destroyed. There are lives at stake. Jeremiah Workman. Everyone can do their part in shattering the stigma attached to PTSD. We control our own opinions and have the power to let veterans know that there is nothing shameful about the injuries they sustained while fighting for us. They're not crazy. They are heroes. To find out how you can help veterans with PTSD and other war-related injuries, check out www.woundedwarriorproject.org.